Solomon can come and close. Okay, so I will not because you are I don't think to enough. Yes.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to this panel, Your Excellencies, distinguished scholars, friends of Carleton, and our general community and students. I would like to say that I feel very honored to chair this occasion, and with all due respect to your spiritual beliefs, sitting here makes me remember the biblical verse about being blessed amongst women. It's really an honor to be here and to chair this all-female panel. So we have about roughly 20 minutes for each of the speakers, and then we hope that we'll manage the time very strictly and have about half an hour for discussions afterwards. From your program, you'll see that we have three very distinguished women on this special panel. It's special because earlier in this conference this afternoon, somebody had invoked famous Sankara. And there's a favorite saying of Sankara that I like to quote a lot. And I think that when I say that, you will understand one of the reasons why he was so special and why he was revolutionary in many ways that many African leaders haven't been. And then he says that women hold the other half of the sky. And, we can modify it, realizing the centrality of Mother Africa to say that women actually hold 3/5 of the sky. On that note, I'd like to invite the speakers in the order in which we have them listed. There are three speakers. And then we're looking at the panel 2, Women and Africa's Transformation Agenda. Again, calling attention to the importance and the important role that women play in our transformation of the continent. So, without much ado, I would, the three speakers are Ms. Malejone Thakanyane from the Lesotho Federation of Women Entrepreneurs. Please welcome her to the panel. And then she will quickly be followed by Honorable Susan Nakawuki, Member of Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly, and who also has a second role that we will not disclose at this moment. Okay, there's already some knowing laughter in the hall. I'll leave it at that. You can feed your curiosity, if you want to pursue that tip that I've just given you. Such a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the panel. And then we also have our colleague from McGill University. When we talk about the Institute of African Studies, we don't just think about the capital city, even when we like to proudly say Canada's capital university. We actually think beyond this immediate locale, and we claim as part of our immediate territory the Gatineau, say, okay, extended capital region, and that also, Gatineau is in Quebec, and my colleague is from Montreal. So our colleague from the extended capital region, McGill, and she is Éliane Ubalijoro. She's a study of international development at McGill University. Also, welcome to the panel. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we'll attentively listen to our first speaker.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your warm welcome to Ottawa, Canada today, although the weather is too cold. My name is Malejone Thakanyane, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. I have traveled all the way to Canada from Lesotho, Southern Africa. I'm here as a Deputy President of the Federation of Lesotho Women Entrepreneurs. a position I have been privileged to hold since the Federation's establishment in 2012. I'm also a committed farmer and businesswoman, specializing in horticulture and relations businesses. I obtained my diploma in horticulture from the Lesotho Agricultural College in 1990. The Federation of Lesotho Women Entrepreneurs has established a broad network of women entrepreneurs who support and nurture women-owned businesses, in particular by providing mentorship and capacity building for young female entrepreneurs. May I extend on behalf of the President of the Federation, Mrs. Mama Hlapane Rakuani, and women in Lesotho, our deep gratitude for being invited to participate in this important conference on the African Union Agenda 2063, assessing the development vision of Africa. I would very much like to thank the African Diplomatic Corps, the African Women Diplomatic Forum, and the Institute of African Studies at Carleton for making it possible for me to be here with you today. The African Union's Agenda 2063 that we are here today to discuss is a vital plan for African women's social, political, and economic empowerment. The AU has declared this year to be the Year of Women's Empowerment and Development in Africa. The Agenda 2063 focuses on the importance of making sure all stakeholders participate in creating, designing, implementing and monitoring and evaluating the agenda. Without the participation of all actors, this agenda will not be successful. Real participation will give the people involved an interest in reaching these goals and will increase their dedication to the process. Therefore, the African Union's focus will be on the full participation of all African stakeholders, especially women and young people, to work together to increase our welfare as a continent, strong and united. Each one of us across Africa can be a part of that effort. African women have an important role to play in improving their own lives and well-being and in helping other African women reach their goals. One focus for Agenda 2063 is to contribute to the rapid expansion of the number of entrepreneurs, including Africa's many young people. Africa entrepreneurs will help promote more economic growth and better technology on the continent. Women are an essential part of this effort. The Federation of Lesotho Women Entrepreneurs was created in December 2012 to improve women's participation and prosperity by creating a platform for business women in Lesotho. Her Majesty Queen Masenate Berenseso of Lesotho officially launched the organization in February 2013. The Federation is a national platform present in Lesotho's 10 districts. Since its establishment, its member has grown from 6,550 to approximately 10,000. The organization has attracted young women and professionals, which will help to increase their skills based among the members and allow us to provide mentorship for potential future leaders. Among our members, our women living with HIV, AIDS, and disabilities. Federation's main objective is to bridge the gender disparity gap and cater to the needs of business women and female leaders from many economic categories. Our federation is a result-focused organization that advocates on women's issues and provides a voice for women in the public and private sectors. The federation aims to empower women through entrepreneurship, create jobs, and help eradicate poverty. Federation allows women to share their experiences successfully, practices, and information, and to interact with other women with the goal of meeting challenges in the economy and in business. Our federation also has the objective of raising policymakers' awareness of gender issues in Lesotho's economy, particularly women's involvement in creating economic plans and in sustainable development. The federation unites women owners of small, medium, and large businesses, and women who wish to become entrepreneurs. Our federation has activities in several areas, including training, advocacy, and lobbying, women's access to finance, business and investment opportunities, networks and partnership, and social responsibility. The federation works to build women's capacity to address the skill deficit among women. We have been able to get 6,000 women involved in training programs, some free, others offered a discount, so they can focus on their businesses and accelerate growth. We plan to provide more space for women in our entrepreneurship training workshops and skills development and leadership programs in the future. Despite women's prominence in leadership positions in the public and private sectors in Lesotho, economic outcomes for women remain poor. Federation lobbies women's representatives at all levels to ensure that they are aware of their roles and responsibility and of the women's empowerment agenda. Women capacity is vital for productivity and prosperity. In Lesotho, women and girls are capital in negatively affected by inequality, gender discrimination, poverty, and disease. The Federation carries out advocacy on women integration into government and private sector empowerment, including by examining government and private companies' measures to provide support and opportunities for women and women-owned businesses. Due to their lack of management and financial skills, women in Lesotho have challenges accessing finance. They are often not able to meet the strict requirements of commercial banks. The government has a partial guarantee scheme, but this is difficult to access because it is administered through commercial banks, which use the same lending terms. The Federation has encouraged women to use existing communal savings strategies to allow them to start their own businesses. To date, members have been able to successfully raise a total of 3 million maluti, the equivalent of $290,000 US, to finance their poultry and tunnel greenhouse farming initiatives. Banks are also engaging with Federation's leadership to agree on appropriate funding models to help members. We also offer to provide business development training, coaching, and advisory support to ensure that women's enterprises are ready to receive funding. Business and investment opportunities are vital part of the Federation's mission. Federation of Lesotho Women Entrepreneurs has facilitated investment in agribusiness, small-scale textiles and manufacturing, and arts and crafts. We help women to carry out activities that include poultry and piggery, horticulture, the production of animal feed, beekeeping, knitting and arts, and handicraft, and more. Among the Federation's members are the Basotho Poultry Farmers Association and the Piggery Farmers Association. The Federation has committees that manage each of the projects. Each month they receive the report on each project's performance. Our organization has also started to make a shift into the international arena and has managed to attract an investor from the United Kingdom for these projects. Regional economic integration is also still a challenge, and members involved in cross-border trade still experience harassment. We are engaging with the Customs Authority for support in building women's capacity to understand customs procedures and requirements. Corporate social responsibility is also being explored to understand how we can partner with corporate actors to work for women empowerment. Federation also works with private and public sectors in Lesotho's business world. The foundation has been able to accomplish so much because it relies on volunteer committees and our branches all over the country, and the partners with national, regional, and international women's organizations with similar missions. We have a working relationship with business development services providers, investment institutions, and a commercial bank. We receive support from Lesotho diplomatic missions abroad and foreign missions in country. This support funds deserving projects proposed by members, capacity building on trade and business issues, and training on sector-specific skills. Federation has recently become part of the board of directors of the Basotho Enterprises Development Corporation. Our organization has a strong emphasis on social responsibility. We have helped women in communities affected by nature disasters to reclaim their livelihoods. In the future, we also intend to focus on education, health and food security, and nutrition. Finally, there are generally no business awards in Lesotho. One day, Federation would like to host the annual Businesswoman of the Year Awards. The Federation's journey has not been without obstacles. We are faced with many challenges. Lesotho lacks development value chain and infrastructure. This makes it difficult for businesswomen to have a voice, get accredited, and access markets. Women and youth participation in domestic, regional, and international markets. The organization is still lacking in leadership skills, which are important for our sustainability and effectiveness in serving our members. Management and entrepreneurship skills remain a challenge for our members and for businesswomen in general, which limits their access to finance. Our leadership and technical team also need to improve their ability to negotiate business agreements. In Lesotho, public and private institutions also lack information and data on issues relating to women and business. This information is vital for better programs and fact-based advocacy on increasing women's participation in the economy. Federation also does not yet have an online presence, which limits our ability to share information, advising our work, and attract members. The Foundation's sustainability is an important issue. The profile and characteristics of the majority of our membership makes it difficult to have subscription fees that will sustain our activities. We have also experienced a turnover of members who initially thought there was money to hand out to them. Lastly, we have not yet succeeded in acquiring strategy assets that can generate income for the organization. The cost of training sessions is another challenge. Training is supposed to be carried out by workers who are already involved in our projects. However, due to the need to meet certain standards, it happens that we sometimes have to pay high fees for the proper training to be provided. Access to finance is a significant issue, which our bank and government of Lesotho are fortunately assisting us with. In closing, we are making progress as a country and together as a continent. We should remain resolved, despite our many challenges, to push for women's meaningful participation in our economies and representative in decision-making structures. I would like to thank you so much for your attention today. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have about the Federation of Lesotho Women Entrepreneurs, and I hope you will be interested in learning more about this organization. Please do not hesitate to come and speak to me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Now, this is what happens when you have an entrepreneur in the house. Every opportunity is to pitch. And she has ended on a very strong pitch. And I endorse it. I think we should take advantage of it. The importance of the panel that we have and the constitution cannot be overemphasized. And I think it's very, very timely. The current edition of NOCOCO, the Institute of African Studies journal, is actually focused on women. It's a special edition dedicated to the African woman. And then the combination that we have of a member of parliament, an entrepreneur, an academic, and activist, represents a broad spectrum, although not all of women in Africa. But it's important that we flagged up on the note of the entrepreneur, and she's made a very strong case about the opportunities that they're exploring. I just thought I should quickly add that a further proof of the kind of success that you're making and the way you're going is the fact that, according to Forbes, which is perhaps one of the most influential business journals in the world, the richest black woman in the world today is an African, and that's Mrs. Folorunso Alakija. She's said to have overtaken Oprah Winfrey. And so we are very proud of the work that you're doing, and on that note, I would invite our second speaker, Susan Nakawuki, Honorable Susan Nakawuki. Let me quickly add, as she's just going to the podium, that I'll be a little bit ruthless with that necessarily, exercising more authority so that we can keep the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All protocol observed. My name is Susan Nakawuki, as you've been told. I'm standing here as an East African and also a Ugandan. I'm a lawyer turned politician. I'm really honored to be standing before you, the diplomats. It's not very easy to stand before diplomats because you have to watch what you say, there's a lot of protocol to observe, but I think I'll try to manage. After all, I'm also a diplomat by association. As I told you, my other level of stepping is my husband is the High Commissioner of Uganda in Canada. But I'm just hoping that I was invited here not because of him, but in my own right as a woman politician.
Yes. You said it.
I represent Uganda in the East African Legislative Assembly, and this is an assembly. It's one of the regional economic blocs in Africa. It comprises of 5 partner states. Those ones include Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. Also, Somalia has applied to join. It's still enjoying the observer status. And South Sudan has also applied, though there's a lot of resistance from the population. But we are heading there because I know 2 are better than 1. Well, my topic of discussion today is the role of African women leadership and governance as relates to the AU Agenda 2063. This is a very interesting discussion, and as Dr. Chigundu earlier mentioned, if we are to ask how many people have been familiar with this kind of topic, indeed, very few. Even in my parliament, if I went and talked about the Africa Agenda, African Union Agenda 2063, they'll ask me, are you meaning the EAC Agenda 2020? So it's a big obligation if we are to achieve the kind of Africa we want. Just to take in a little bit of obiter dictum, I know I have 20 minutes, but I hope my preamble is not included in the 20 minutes. One time I visited a furniture store, and I found a group of young people, the youth. They were deeply involved in a discussion. And I paused because I thought maybe it's a staff meeting. So I didn't want to be seen as a trespasser. So I stopped a little bit to listen to what they had to say. And then I realized these young people were saying how bitter they were with their grandparents. And the reason why they were bitter with their grandparents was that as slavery was taking place, they were running away into bushes and shambles. Instead of allowing to be taken into the European world, they instead hid in the bushes. And they were complaining that at their great-grandparents given in, right now there will be the Beyoncés, the Jay-Z's, name it. And I was really intrigued by the fact that these people don't really see themselves as the Africans. They're not so proud of it. They're proud to be something different. And now I'm really happy that we have this kind of Africa that we want to belong to. And I'm sure if every young person is brought on board, they will really be proud of being Africans. And they will be maybe much happier with their grandparents. Back to my topic of discussion about women leadership. In a survey that was done in 2014, it was realized that, looking at the continental statistics, only 21.9 of women were in parliament. That one shows that the level of involvement of women in positions of leadership is still minimal. And it's my role and your role as a woman leader to ensure that actually we increase these numbers. I cannot talk about the role of women before I look at the aspirations of the Agenda 2063. I'll not indulge so much in them because I know the ambassador of Ghana talked about them, but I will refer to them briefly just to enrich my discussion. The first aspiration being a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development, in which we are talking about elimination of poverty, having high standards of living in Africa, well-educated citizens, modern agriculture, where we shall have to banish the hand hoe which a lot of youth actually don't want to associate with, where we shall have value addition in our production, where we'll have reduced dependence on donor aid, extra. And then aspiration number 2, an integrated continent, politically united based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance, where we're talking about an integrated Africa, where we'll enjoy the borderless Africa, where you're free to move the way they do it in the AU. You move from Switzerland to France, no border. It's like you're on a highway, no one bothers. And you're looking forward to that, where we'll not require any visas as Africans to visit any African country, where we'll have free and fair elections, where we shall have world-class infrastructure connecting major capitals, where we shall have free movement of people, goods, services, and capital. Aspiration number 3, an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. And this one seriously talks about the gender equality, with women integrated in all structures of decision-making and governance, where we shall have no corruption, no impunity, where we shall have the grassroots fully involved in decision-making, because we are looking at people-centered East Africa. And I hope we really have that one, which is people-centered. And then aspiration number 4, a peaceful and secure Africa, where we'll have the gun silent, as earlier mentioned, by 2020. We are all looking forward to that, I guess. Where we shall have peaceful resolution of conflicts, where we shall have gender equality, where we shall have no acts of terrorism and no gender-based violence. Then aspiration 5, an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics, where we shall have the Pan-Africanism fully entrenched in all our schools, where we shall have a common African language. I know the East African community, we've been struggling with this because we speak different languages. We have Rwanda and Burundi using French, then Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, we use English, and also Kenya and Tanzania, they use a lot of Swahili. So myself, when I go to Rwanda and Burundi, where they're using French, maybe I only know bonjour and bon appetit, or even merci beaucoup. But after that, maybe I use sign language. And then you've been struggling on how to come up with a lingua franca for the community until it was agreed that we are going to develop Swahili as a language where we are all going to be able to communicate in the same language. So this will bring everyone on board. And I'm looking forward to a day where all Africans probably will adapt the Swahili. English, well, we are attached to the British, it's a borrowed language. So the most appropriate one will be the Swahili. So I'm still looking forward to that day. And then aspiration 6, which is most important to me as a woman politician, an Africa where development is people-driven, unleashing the potential of its women and youth, where no woman, man, child will be left out on the basis of gender, political affiliation, etc., where women will be able to enjoy their rights, including rights to own property, to inherit property, to contracts, among others, where there will be no violence against women, where women will be occupying 50%, not any less, not 40, but 50% of all the elective positions and government offices. Oh, that would be so nice. I hope our counterparts, the men, will accept this, and it's possible because you're going to work alongside with them to achieve that. And finally, the 7th aspiration is Africa as a strong, united, and influential global player. Just on top of that, although women remain significantly underrepresented in terms of politics, in terms of government offices, we should not currently just capitalize on that, on our underrepresentation, but we should actually look at more of what we are able to achieve when we attain these positions or these offices. Because I know what identifies us as women or women leaders is not the lack of challenges, but our ability to thrive or to find solutions to these challenges. And now that's what takes me to my major topic of discussion, which is the role of women leadership and governance when it comes to Agenda 2063 that I just talked about. Our key role, especially for me as a politician, is legislation. Because when we are involved as women leaders, we are in a position where we are supposed, or we can determine the kind of policies and programs which are brought forward by government, or which kind of legislation we are to have to govern leadership in our countries. So you find that, actually one of the scholars said that, well, I take it to be a bit impolite, but the scholar said, if you don't participate in politics, then you end up ruled by fools. That's what he said, that scholar, not me. So I believe if you don't participate as women, we'll be ruled by other people who will not have our interests at heart. So we have to participate in this legislative role so that all the laws that are put in place reflect that equality that we are yearning for, reflect the agenda which is set forth by the African Union, the agenda that I personally call a gift. Let me just tell you a small story. How many minutes do I have?
You have 5.
Only? He's probably counting in bases.
I was actually going to give you the paper.
Okay, just a small story. I will use 1 minute
Okay.
for that, and then I go back to mine. There's this small kid who used to receive gifts from the parents over Christmas. And so every time he received a gift, he was wondering why for him he never gives any gifts to the parents for Christmas. Because they would put the gifts under the Christmas tree and will never have anything. So he asked his father, how can I also make money so that I can be buying for you and mom gifts over Christmas? So they told him you have to work. So he asked the father for a job so that he can also make some money. So the father asked him to be cleaning his vehicle, and then he would pay him every weekend. So this boy got a piggy bank and used to save his money. So a few days to Christmas, he got all his money and went to a shopping mall because he wanted to find Christmas gifts for the parents. So that day, when he went to the mall, he asked one of the mall attendants that, which kind of gift would you buy for your father or mother for Christmas? So the attendant said, well, my father loves cars, so I'll buy him a small car. So he pulled out his little change and asked if that money could buy a car. He was told no. So he went to another store. He asked the same question. And then the other attendant told him, my father loves hunting, so I would buy him a gun. So he wondered if the money he had was enough to actually buy this gun. And they said no. So he felt disgruntled and he decided to go and just find a gift. So he found a torch, which had a string. He wrapped it up and then put under the Christmas tree. Now on Christmas Day, the father also had a gift from the son, which gift was a torch. And now the son requested the father that, Daddy, I've given you this present, but promise me one thing, that you always have my torch under your neck, which I feel was very hard because they see you, a big man, walking around with a torch around your neck. So the father had to obey, and he did it, he fulfilled it. So he went fishing because he loved fishing, and then the boat capsized. He had a small jerry can which helped him to to float on top. And now, as he was stuck on the sea with no help, eventually remembered he had a small torch. He lit the torch, and somehow he was found floating, but not dead. And what saved him was the little torch. So our heads of state gave us this gift, the AU Agenda 2063. It's very appetizing. And in fact, if you are to achieve it, Africa will be the best place to live in. Because even the way we are right now, there's a big rush. Everyone is running to Africa. China is already having a lion's share in Africa. Everyone wants the Africa, but what is our role? This is the role we have to play right now. By passing this favorable legislation, I know there's a good practice to borrow from Uganda. Uganda has been very instrumental in fighting for the plea of women, where different legislation has been enacted, especially against violence against women, female genital mutilation, among others. The other role we can play as women is resource allocation, where we can appropriate the budget. We make sure that we pass a budget which is gender responsive, or a budget which can ensure that we fulfill this agenda. Usually, I remember last year, the Uganda Parliament declined to pass the Uganda budget, reason being the budget which had been allocated to health was minimal. They refused. The president summoned them and talked to them, and this is the first time they were really united as a parliament, despite the political affiliation. And they refused to pass the budget until it was actually increased. The budget for health was increased. So that way we can form maybe a pressure group as women and then pull it off. Then the other role we can play an oversight role as women, whereby we can oversight the government and hold them accountable on fulfilling this agenda. We can ask for implementation reports from government to actually see how far the government has gone with implementation of the agenda. We can also monitor and hold government accountable on this agenda to ensure political commitments. We can hold government accountable on the resources. We can help fight corruption, and we can also help to empower the citizenry to hold the leaders accountable. Then women leaders can also raise a network of women and men policymakers who are committed to apply the approaches that promote gender equality. Why I'm saying women and men is that the men should be stakeholders in this if you are to be able to achieve. Women can also provide a representative role because NDI conducted a survey in Kenya whereby they're trying to find out amongst the women and the men who are better legislators or who are better representatives of the people. And with the survey, it ended up that women, thank you, time. Okay, give me one extra minute. The survey indicated that the women actually are better representatives of the people because of the way they prioritized when it came to issues of legislation. For example, they catered more with issues to do with social sectors, yet men catered more with maybe security, among others. And then we can also play a role of advocacy. We can advocate more for us to buy in and own this agenda. At least women leaders can be involved at an earlier stage than at a later stage. And finally, we can play a role in creating awareness amongst the leaders at different levels to ensure that the people own this agenda and then they are able to fully participate. I want to thank you, much as your time was very limited. Allow me to end here. I know this is a long-term strategy. Somebody can ask why 50 years, but I know it has worked for China and it can work for Africa. I thank you.
That's the not so comfortable role of the moderator. I'm not happy doing that. So just excuse me. Thank you very much. Her topic, her title was a role of African women in leadership and governance as it relates to AU Agenda 2063, and a whole lot of things that could be done. Looks like a template of challenges and opportunities, and I think you brought your experience, to bear on having to explore that. Thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. We will now take our third speaker, Éliane Ubalijoro from McGill University, who is going to take the podium. Being the first from this part of the presentation, I want not to remind about the time, so that we can have, I see that, there's so much that they have to offer, and I believe that the Q&A session would allow them to delve deeper to illustrate the points that they have made, so that we can have more time. Thank you so much, and you're free to present from the podium, from the table here, if you prefer, rather than going to the podium.
Thank you. So just to give you a little bit more background, I'm based at McGill University where I'm a professor of practice, but I'm from Rwanda. And just to highlight the previous speaker's point about getting more women involved in politics, I mean, we're all aware that Rwanda has the highest percentage of women parliamentarians in the world, over 60%. And so I really loved what you said about, you know, let's not be ruled by fools, let's participate, let's engage. And so what I wanted to do to start out with is to read a poem by Ozioma Ugwenyu, who's a Nigerian woman and who's the president of Women Rising, Rising Women, Rising World. So she writes, "Give me opportunity and I will grow wings. I know why the caged bird sings. Give me opportunity and I will grow wings. I am a rising woman in a rising world. I play my part as it turns, shaping and molding, giving and holding. I am a rising woman, still I rise." So I wanted to start with a poem because you know, we can bring data, we can look at legislation, but we have to remember the woman is the heart of the home. And as we nurture the women of the world, we nurture the soil that nurtures and grows our children. And if we look at how women are treated in the world, and we look at how the soil of there's about billions of tons of soil that's eroded each year. And that soil could be used to grow food. And reasons are numerous, from deforestation, need for fuel, expansion of urban areas. And the reality is, the way we treat our soil, how we preserve our biodiversity, how we take care of our planet, is also a reflection of how we take care of our homes, how we nurture what's inside. And so when we get to a place where we nurture our homes, where we value our women, where we value our children, we will also get to a place where we value the planet we live on. And so holding these both spaces are really important, because the image we all hold in some way is the woman heating the home, heating our food, preparing what has grown us to be who we are today. And that's really important. And so how do we help African women move forward? One of the biggest issues we have in Africa, Africa has the highest arable land that isn't being used currently for agriculture in the world. And one of the issues is a lot of that land is either in areas that are high conflict areas, so doing agriculture when there's a possibility of all sorts of warfare to happen isn't a good thing. Also, land tenure issues. Who owns the land? So legislation around increasing women's ownership of land is extremely important, and the more women have ownership of land, the more they're able to get loans, the more they're able to grow their businesses. As the first speaker was talking about, how do we ensure that women have access to capital to grow their ideas, to vision their dreams into actual commercial products that benefit society? So some of the examples I'd just like to talk about briefly from Rwanda span very different areas. One of the things, we've talked about value chain. And often, when there are gaps in the value chain, because of the way access to finance is not always possible, in most cases, it can be non-governmental agencies, non-profit, local non-profits, I'm talking about local organizations, that can start filling a gap that can later become social enterprises, that can become full-fledged entrepreneurial endeavors. And so what's been interesting for me, because we're in 2015, so Rwanda post-genocide is 21 years old. And next week, in 2 weeks, I'll be flying to Rwanda. So this is very important to me, because last year I was in Rwanda for the 20th commemoration. And the roles women have taken as policymakers, as leaders of nonprofits, as leaders of businesses, has been instrumental in starting the healing process. Healing process is something that can take generations. But the role women play in rebuilding the family unit is critical to how we move forward. And so on this past weekend, I was with a young Rwandan woman who's a scholar at McGill. And she grew up as an orphan and was later taken in at Agahozo Shalom Village, which is a village where orphans are taken in and given excellent education. And a lot of the students who come out receive prestigious scholarships to go into the best universities around the world. And several of these students are at McGill right now. And in that village, each home has a mother, and most of those mothers lost most of their children, if not all of their children, during the genocide. And so they take in and take care of these orphans as their own children. As they heal their own wounds, they help heal the wounds of Rwanda's youth. And so the importance of building these connections is really, really important. Another example I'd like to talk about is legislation. When post-genocide, one of the things that happened in Rwanda is women gained a lot of rights that they didn't have before. Before 1994, women couldn't open bank accounts on their own. They needed their husband's or their father's authorization. Land was transmitted from father to son. Women had no rights in terms of inheriting land. And when the legislation to fight violence against women and children were put in place, how the women parliamentarians went about it wasn't about talking to their male colleagues and say, let's think about your wife. They said, think about your daughter. If this happened to your daughter, because, nobody wants to mess with their couple, but we can all think of our children. And so they really appealed to the fathers in their male colleagues to get their support to move forward the legislation that really brought legislation in Rwanda to fight violence against women and children. So these are positive examples. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but I'm saying we're moving, and it's about moving forward, and it's moving forward step by step. Another example I really love is an organization called Ngomaicha. It's New Drum or New Rain. And it's an organization, it's the first troupe of women drummers in Rwanda. Traditionally, drumming in Rwanda was reserved to men. And so after 1994, a group of women came together and said, we're going to start drumming. And they had a competition, and a lot of women came. But they could only take a few, because they had to raise the funds, they had to figure out how to tour locally and then internationally. And so only a few women were chosen of the best in drumming. And they've now toured all over the world. And they actually have a documentary out called Nzozi Nziza, which means sweet dreams. And what they did is they created a social enterprise where the women who wanted to be drummers but couldn't started a business selling ice cream and buying produce, milk, eggs, fruit from local farmers and producing ice cream to be sold in the city. And so the other women were able to participate, even if they weren't drumming, but they participated in the social enterprise. So income was created for women as artists, income was created for women as social entrepreneurs, building value chains related to agriculture. And so this was a way women worked to really advance the work we need to do in terms of healing ourselves, because they also created space for women to talk about the pain they felt and they lived through the genocide. And so what's really critical here is how are all the ways women come together. Oh, I have to be careful of time. Oh my God. Okay. Ooh, okay. I just have so much to say in so little time. So anyway, so these are some of the examples I wanted to mention. In general, if I look at Africa in general, what are the areas that personally I think are really critical to get things moving forward? So increasing girls' access to education, especially STEM education, science, technology, mathematics. And one of the things that's needed is increased women teachers, because often when girls move from childhood to teenagehood, the level of confidence that in general is really, here's an interesting fact. Men will advance facts if they are 20% confident in their facts. women need to be at least 80%, and I really think it's 120. And so the reality is that in science and technology, it's all about coming forward, taking risks, and moving forward. And so creating safe spaces for women to take risks is really important if we want to allow them to become innovators, risk takers that allow us to amplify the work needed to bring the voices in rural areas and urban areas to really advance Africa. It's really important to increase reproductive rights for women and girls. And it's a delicate issue because most people don't want to think that girls have rights related to reproductive bodies. And one of the areas there is that in a lot of cases, girls don't know how to negotiate no. So there are simple things. Yes, it'd be great if girls could have access to contraception if that's what they want. But really, how do you get a girl to negotiate? And so one of the things that's happened in Rwanda is there's a forum theater platform that's been created where girls come and they enact, they negotiate. So somebody pretends he's coming to try and get her interested, and she practices saying no. Because often when it happens, you don't even know what happens. And what's important about this is it can happen with your colleague, it could happen with your teacher, it could happen with your uncle. And so if you're enacting it with friends and practicing it, the day it happens to you, you're prepared. So remember that 20-80%? We have to build girls' agency if we want them to be able to get through school, study for as long as possible so that when they do have children, they have the power to take care of their children properly. And part of it, it's not about promiscuity, it's really about agency, protection, empowering girls. And so that's something that's really important for us to do. Do I need to wrap up?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a very strategic time to get in.
So one of the things I'd like to just say is, women's stories of challenges and opportunities and successes are really important to share. The more we share women's stories, the more other women, other girls can say, you know what, she did it, I can. And it's okay to fail. Because what I've realized is the most successful people I know are the people who failed the most. But most people don't get to meet the most successful people in the world. And so they don't know that. They don't know that failing is part of the journey. And teaching our youth, and especially our young girls, to do that is really important. Creating spaces that intersect business, policymakers, and researchers so that information flows, so that we talk across not only the different languages, Swahili, French, and English, but the languages of policy, of business, of research, and communicate with each other better. Also, what we need to do is move out of scarcity mentalities and go into growth mindsets. Because as we grow our growth mindsets, we can re-image Africa. Because I can't say everything I want to say, I encourage anybody who wants to learn more to listen to my TEDx that's available online, where I talk about re-imaging Africa from scarcity to prosperity. And so what I'd like to conclude by saying is, let's connect women to skills, to networks, to policymakers. Let's share, let's listen, and let's nurture their dreams for the children of 2063.
I try to remember a word that you used that I think I really would like to stick in my mind. Is that Nzonzi Nzonza? Nzonzi Tiza.
Ooh, I'll write it down for you.
No, please say it because I want us to take away that.
Nzozi Ziza.
Nzonzi Ziza. Did I get it finally? Nzonzi Ziza. This is just so powerful, sweet dreams. And once you said that, I remember what a friend of mine had said about the irony of one of the most popular songs in very formal ceremonies in Nigeria, which happens, you see the interesting coincidence there. That song is usually played when mothers' birthdays take place. Do I have anybody who knows that song? And it also happens to be a song by somebody who is not originally a Nigerian, but it's almost like a national anthem when mothers are being celebrated. Pious. That's it. Yeah, Sweet Mother by Prince Nikombaga from the Cameroon. And my friend would say, look at them, they're dancing to Sweet Mother, but when they leave here, they're going to oppress the women. So there's a sense in which Sweet Dreams, it's so important. And I think bringing in the poetry and all of that, you have animated us even more to launch into the conversations, which the Q&A typically would be, I imagine. So on that note, I would like to invite questions so that we can snatch it. Oh my gracious, we have somebody right there. Okay, so that we'll manage to snatch a coffee break before we come back for the final session, which coincidentally I'm also moderating. So you can stick around at least if you want to hear me. I'll try and crack more jokes than I can tell you. So do come back after that. So please go on. We'll follow the pattern that we had used earlier on. Quickly introduce yourself, and then let's keep the questions very brief. If there are comments, we would also appreciate it if you could keep it very tight so that we can have more people go around in the spirit of the democracy that we're promoting in the continent. Yes, please.
Well, I think it's not working. Oh, yeah. In my event, I want to thank the speakers. I'm new to the African development spectrum. You have educated me again. As for you, the women's in Lesotho, I am offering my services. I'm a business development strategist. Great. I'm offering my services to the association. Now, the second speaker talked, Mrs. Your Honor, you talked about women's leadership. Part of my project in Africa is women's empowerment and education, plus agricultural, which is feed the mind, and then you could feed the business. So I am awaiting, I don't know if you know that, I'm awaiting an invitation from the Ugandan government to go and instill my project in Uganda. So if you're the first one to be, you will be my key to Africa. Thank you. You talked about uni language. There is a uni language called Esperanto, which means in French, espérance means hope. So Esperanto is a universal language. Okay. Well, yeah, and women participating in politics, it should be, because you guys make more sense than us guys. So all the power to you in that sense. And to you from McGill, Rwanda, I'm from Rwanda, and our region is called Rwanda. So I am from the same country you are. So your poem is excellent. I would like to have the details of it. Now, the highest arable land in Africa, without having been on the continent, I knew that. I don't know where I get it. It's probably from my old spirits. Then you talked about, well, anyways, bring power to the woman. You should be the leaders of this. You should be the leaders in governments, because guys don't know a thing about it. Okay, I'm not a politician. I'm a developer. Thank you, and thank you for everything.
Okay, shall we have, yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Sule, from the Ghana High Commission. I really have two points. The first is quite commendation for the very insightful presentations, and many of them thought-provoking. I realize, though, that there is an empowerment model around building capacities, networking among women and entrepreneurs, but also giving us vignettes of what leadership among women looks like, but also the ways in which we can regenerate women's capacities. What I'm particularly keen about and would like to hear from all of you is the gender dimension, because there is a relationship between women empowerment and the whole process of both conscientizing men who presently occupy certain rather critical positions of authority. And many of the models that we are advocating about empowerment would probably need a relational aspect, including building capacity of some men most men to be more sensitized to the issues of gender and the empowerment models that you promote in order that the real inclusive development can occur. So I'd like to hear from all of you or any of you what aspects of your models might lend themselves to an inclusiveness that would allow men to be better sensitized so that we can get out of the conundrum of having to have rather lopsided development.
All right, thank you. So let's take a few more questions and then we can just have responses to the questions. Yes, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody.
So we'll do it in this order. We'll take one here. So rather than having two people queue, just distribute yourself. We'll take one on the left, one on the right, one on the left. And I think I'll do that 2-2, and we probably might end on that, unless somebody changes their mind and wants to ask the final question. So we take 4 questions, and that will give us maximum of 7 minutes or about 1 minute per question.
Okay. I thank you for giving me the floor, and good afternoon, everybody. And my thanks and appreciations for the organizer of this important conference, of course. And I have a comment. I would like to present myself. Firstly, my name is Arwa Saleh. I'm from Embassy of Sudan, and I couldn't resist to comment on such important issue like the role of women in Africa on the agenda of 2063. My comment briefly will be, yes, there is essential, important women role in our region and our continent, and as well as all over the world. It is well known, highlighting in every forum on the international level, on the UN forums for women, and it's in the heart of the agenda post 2015, and it's everywhere. We know that very well. And I would like to go back to what have been said about the role of young people, as well. I will call upon the story or the things that have been mentioned with the distinguished speakers about the youth conversation in Africa. It was a story will be in my mind for a long time, because I know there is such stories in every individual country. You might find young people talking about flying away from our continent. But on the other hand, I'm quite sure there is a lot of young people and a lot of women who's working hard to participate on the development of their continent and states individually. And here I would like to go back to what have been said in the first session with the distinguished speakers about the frustration. Yes, there is a big frustration, because if you want to work, you have to work through a system. And here I would like to comment about the international will and the African will to have it happen. I mean, if on the international agenda we're talking about the people as the center of our development, if the people are in the center of our agenda, we should overcome a lot of conditionalities, a lot of likes and dislikes to reach our, I think it's great goals, but there is a hard, complex reality as well should be taken in consideration. I thank you very well for this, very much for this opportunity, and wish to join such forums in the future again. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Yes, please.
I just want to witness some of the comments that were made a few minutes ago. I did, in 1964, I started my studies at the University of Rwanda and graduated there, so many years ago I was there. And I can witness what happened in Rwanda, because since 1994, you are right, Madame, reconciliation has worked a great deal. It's a novelty. Other countries are looking at that example. I witnessed also 2 years ago with Michael Jean, the troupe of woman drummer in Butare. That was super great. And I must say that in 50 years, we talk about 2063, if we write the story of Rwanda, we will have a great deal of things to say about drama that happened there, but also historical movement. Reconciliation, you invented that process. 50 majority of women in parliament, you were the first one there too. So I congratulate what you've done there, and thank you also for coming to Canada, and there's a lot of people from Rwanda and Canada and going back and forth. So I admire what the country did in spite of all of the drama that happened there 20 years ago.
Thank you. I think that when we plan this event, I hope that the very honorable diplomatic corps, African in Ottawa, would think about a second edition of this. And then we'll hope to invite the women drummers and others.
Yes.
So we should think about doing this again. I'm following with a presentation on entrepreneurship to make a very small pitch there. So please, here, yes. Sure.
My name's Tyler. I'm a graduate of African Studies here at Carleton, starting my MA in political economy in the fall. I've spent some time in Lesotho, Dumela. And I want to recount the story of a friend of mine that I met in Johannesburg a couple years ago, who's from Maseru, had her university funded by Lesotho, the government, at Wits Business School, and then she graduated with her MA in finance, went back to Maseru to look for work to become a consultant for small businesses, and could not find any work in that area, and so ended up having to go back to Joburg to find work, so kind of was lost by Lesotho in that way. I'm just wondering if you could help me to pass along some advice to her in terms of finding work in that field, in terms of small business or business consulting in Lesotho. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Yes, and then that's the last question. Fortunately, there have been more comments than questions, but I will turn over to our speakers to wrap up.
My name is Lily Obina, and my question really is around education. Because I know we can have legislation, we can have all these businesses, but if our girls are busy in the villages, you know, supporting the families and doing all those things, what are we doing as a community to be able to provide education for these girls? Because in most cases, boys are allowed to go to school. I come from a culture where there's a gap, because sometimes the girls are left behind, and even if you try to help them, they are not helpable. So what are we doing in terms of education to empower these girls? And in Canada, we have free education up to high school. So I wonder if African governments are thinking of, I know you're gonna give, you know, like free education, but how far are we going to go and support the girls to get into higher education and support the economy?
All right, thank you. So there have been more comments, and then we'll give you the opportunity. We're looking at Agenda 2063, and our time is really up, but we have to complete the protocol. So let me start in the reverse way that we started. So I'll be turning to you, Éliane.
Okay. So I know the three things I'd like to respond to. The role of men around gender. Well, I think the role fathers have in terms of the confidence they can give their daughters. I think the role fathers have in terms of empowering their daughters, encouraging their daughters to stay at school, protecting their daughters from female genital mutilation, because it's the father's word. If the father says no, it won't happen. And so there's a lot of things men can do to protect their daughters. In Rwanda, there's actually associations of men against violence towards women and girls. So there's actually associations of men reflecting on the issue of how do we make the country safer for women. And so I think that's something, a model that I don't know if other countries have it, but that's definitely a place that I think is really stands strong, saying we as men stand against violence. In terms of the putting people at the center, one of the things I wanted to talk about is the fact that funding agencies, I'm a researcher, so my life is getting grants, and a lot of the research funding right now for Africa requires lead investigators to be based in Africa. So the agenda is switching over. In early January, the Gates Foundation had their first major call around socioeconomic empowerment of women. And this was for a project for $500,000 to $2.5 million. And the lead institution had to be African and ideally led by a woman. So putting people at the center is changing. I personally hold a Phase 1 grant from the Gates Foundation around feedback innovation for agricultural development. And the idea is, how do you get the rural farmers to tell you what the development agenda should be? And so I was in Rwanda in November listening to women farmers, gave them cameras, and they go out and they take pictures of what they see as the challenges and opportunities in their work. And then we invite their communities, husbands, people in their cooperatives to come and listen to the women present their picture. And often these women, it's the first time they've taken a picture and they see it printed in color, and then they present it in front of their communities. So the power of story, having women tell their stories to their communities. And often it's the first time they actually say, what is it that I do great? And what is it that I have challenges with that need improvement? And we bring the Rwanda Agricultural Board, so policymakers, to come and listen to the women so they can implement policies based on what the women say. So the spaces of putting people at the center of development is something that's happening. It may be still at the nascent stage, but it's happening. Around education support for girls, one initiative that I love is FAWE, it's the Federation for Educationalists Women, for African Women Educationalists, and they currently have a $17 million project to promote education of women, of girls in science and technology, STEM education in Rwanda and Ethiopia. So there's a lot. CamFed is a phenomenal nonprofit that just got about $50 million funding to promote education of girls in Africa. And the great thing about CamFed is they will look at the most marginalized girls in the population and fund them. And they will keep funding them until they say, I've had enough education. So if you want to go to your PhD, they'll fund you until your PhD. And after, they have women forums around innovation and entrepreneurship. So they build networks. And then the women become volunteers and mentors in the community to find vulnerable girls who need funding to move forward. I can keep going, but I'll let my colleagues speak.
Thank you so much for being considerate. All right. Yes, please.
But first of all, say that I didn't know that 20 minutes is too short until today. Just to respond to a few issues. One about the gender dimension. What model can we use to get men more sensitized? In Africa, we usually use Rwanda as a model country. For example, it has women representation of 64% in the Chamber of Deputies. And actually, I don't know of any country which has functional institutions or administrative units like Rwanda. So the women are in charge and they are really delivering. The rate of delivery is like 99%. So we can borrow a leaf from there. And the men in Rwanda are not even complaining about it. They are able working with the women and things are going on normally. We also have a model that is being used in Uganda. We have the affirmative action, like for members of parliament, there are seats which are specifically put in place for women. Every district is represented by a woman, and there are also women who contest directly with the men for these elective positions. So the Uganda parliament has 133 women, and they are really fighting for the plight of women there, and they're being able to make things work. And then we have an example in Gambia. They wanted to pass a gender legislation, which failed like twice or thrice, but when the women agreed now to cooperate regardless of their political affiliations, they were able to pull it off despite the fact that the men were more in the house and the women were minimal, but they managed to lobby the men, and then the legislation was eventually passed. And then looking at the question Madame Lily Obina asked about the education, what we are doing as women to empower the girls and keep them in school, yes, it's a duty for all of us. Because even when the girls are in school, their rights are not respected. Even with the elite families, you could feel proud that your children are in school, but do they have the right to play? Do you have time for your children? Because we are all going to school, we have numberless degrees, every day you're doing this, PhD, name it. You literally don't have time for these children. So they end up not having role models. They wake up at 5 o'clock to go to school, they get back home at 9 in the night. I mean, that way still we are not doing our job as leaders. And then there is a challenge of cultural practices. We find that we still have African countries where marital age is 15. And at 15, the parents are sending away their children into marriage. So until we curb such cultures, we are not going to be able to keep the girls in school. In Uganda, we adopted a model. It's true we have free primary education, but this was among the Millennium Development Goals. We managed to have it implemented. But for girls to join university, there is an extra incentive for girls. There is a 1.5 points for every girl joining university. At least the intake of girls is made a bit easier because of this 1.5. And this way many girls have been able to join the university. Yes, it's true women make more sense than men, but we need to partner. Unless we partner, we are not going to be able to pull it off as women because we find resistance and we might not be able to put up with it. I'm glad that my husband puts up with me because for him he's in Canada and then me, I'm traversing East Africa and then we meet once in a while. But she's still comfortable, you're still just me around. And the gentleman who wanted an invitation to Uganda, my deputy ambassador is here, Madam Margaret. He will definitely be happy to invite you to Uganda, and myself, I'll give you an open invitation anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we are doing a number of things, including networking. So over to you. You started this panel, and then now you're closing it.
Thank you, Daddy. I remember in 2005, that was my first time to get a loan from the bank in Lesotho. So one of the agreements that I had to sign with the bank was for my husband to come and approve for the loan. And I was so angry and saying, should my husband not allow me to get the loan, I will not get a loan. But I'm happy because 2 years after that, I was getting a loan without anybody's confirmation. So it really shows that the Basotho women and actually the African women has got a strong input in changing even the laws in our countries. So that's what makes me very, very proud of. And concerning the issue of the children, the girls, really we need our husbands to come and support us, raise our children and give them their well-being. I remember in Lesotho when I was still young, our fathers were normally used to work for South Africa as mine workers. Our mothers were used to raise us alone, help us go to school, do everything, take the full responsibility as a mother and a father at the same time. So what I'm trying to say is that women will always be the best. Women has got power. Women needs to be recognized and be seen as best leaders in our countries. Thank you.
Okay, I guess in setting up this panel, we asked for it. We've ended up on a very high tone of women empowerment. And so we'll probably be saying Amandla. Women are very powerful, and one of the pieces of advice that older parents give to new couples is to tell them that, to remember that, oh, you're a man, you're very strong, but remember that you need your wife for the home to run. So you have both soft power and strong power all rolled into one. I think this has been a phenomenal panel, and if you would join me to thank our speakers for such very nice. So we'll take, I'm afraid we can't take more than 10 minutes coffee break, and then I will reconvene at 3:15. We are running behind schedule, but I will do my very best in the next panel so that we can finish on time, because we have just two speakers, and then we have the wrap-up and the closing ceremonies by His Excellency Solomon Azombi, the High Commissioner of Cameroon to Canada and the Vice Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps. I want to say at this point that we are looking at the end, that the kind of partnership we've talked about here, it's already evident in the way this program is structured. We have the African Diplomatic Corps and the important African Women Diplomatic Forum in association with Carleton University. And just as we're moving on to the coffee break, I want to proudly say that the president of this university is a woman. And she is championing a whole lot of revolution in terms of the physical infrastructure, intellectual and academic enrichment. And I also come from two other universities where there were women presidents, Brown and the University of Alberta. So women rule. See you guys in 10 minutes. Now because I'm not a woman, you're not clapping for me.
No, we have. Woo!
Thank you.